everybody, welcome back to the DAO podcast. I'm your host, Eugene Creepy MC. We are continuing to explore what's going on in the Web3 space. And Web3 includes NFT as building blocks, Metaverse, and another part of our life, and so on. So for you already know all this. And today is going to be, I would say, the fashion Metaverse episode, because I'm waiting for your online applauses. I'm having Lauren Kacher. She is a Web3 fashion pioneer, digital fashion consultant, and the founder and creative director of the first DAO-led fashion label, Alterrage. Since 2012, Lauren has worked in the luxury fashion industry in New York, London. Now she's based in Paris. So she's absolutely experienced designer, and she's the most experienced designer from the real physical world I have ever had in my podcast. By the way, she's also the advisory member of Metaverse Fashion Council DAO. And here I send one greetings to Kazbek Bektursunov and Sharat Agrawal. They were guests on our podcast too. So guys, greetings for you. So Laura, it's great pleasure and honor to have you on our podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Nice to see you here, Eugene. And thanks for that introduction. Pleasure.
Well, so you are an amazing person. First of all, you have had up to 10 years of design experience, and now you are in Web3. This is, I cannot say this is switching, because by the one part of your mind, you are still staying in the world of physical design. By another part of your mind, you're staying in the world of Web3. And that's why, if I'm mistaken, please correct me, but this is why you have invented the term phygital. We will talk about that, right?
Yeah.
So tell us, please, your story in Web3. How did you switch your career from design, fashion, luxury industry to Web3?
Yeah, I mean, it's been quite a long road, as you've mentioned. But yeah, I think like everything kind of leads to the next, and sometimes you don't anticipate your journey to be in the order that you want, but you definitely like still learn along the way. So yeah, as you mentioned before, I'm American, but I've lived in different countries to work in fashion. I've always had kind of this dream of working in luxury, and I just kept, pursuing it, pushing for it. And so I worked in New York, was in London, and then now in Paris. And yeah, more recently kind of working in accessory design, more luxury level. And so that is what I was doing before. I think there are a couple like people like in Web3 kind of feel there's their life before Web3 and then after Web3. I think I kind of feel a bit like this. And so when I made that switch, it was around the time of the pandemic. And so this was maybe about 2 years ago, started to maybe have some difficulty in the industry. A lot of projects were stopping. And so I come from a design background. And so I've done kind of a mix of production, of luxury, of accessory design. So there was definitely a difficulty in the industry around that. And then fashion as well, I would say, is quite traditional. In Paris, especially, it's based on this idea of craftsmanship, also like smaller quantities, but like the timeline in fashion, I think because of fast fashion in different markets has really sped it up. And so it's really become quite unsustainable environmentally and also within the workplace. So I was having difficulty with this. And so pandemic came, basically had to kind of reset, become a freelancer. And that's when I started to really open my mind to what are the possibilities beyond this very saturated industry. And so I found Web3. I became a part of different communities. One most notably was Digital X. And so that's really where I learned about how to have a wallet, how to work in Discord. I had no idea. You come from this very, different place. And I wasn't a gamer. I had none of this kind of previous experience. But what I saw in it was a whole new vision of how the world can work, and using blockchain to really empower creators, to kind of remove blocks that I had faced in every city of just trying to, be in this industry. And so I saw that, and I saw it as a huge opportunity. And I just, kept trying to learn more about it, meet different kinds of profiles, you having this podcast. And then after kind of learning those skills is when I started to found my own projects such as Alterrage.
Well, I know that a lot of designers, I would say, I will call them physical designers from the physical world, will be watching this podcast, and of course they are wondering how exactly does your huge design experience in the luxury design industry help you in Web3? Because Web3 is not a physical world. It's where real people act, of course. And here my Austrian economist comes and, hey, of course they are real people with their subjective values, but that's not part of the story. We won't be discussing there. But nonetheless, how exactly your design experience help you in Web3? Does it help at all?
Yeah, I would say it would. So I'm a Libra, so maybe it makes me more kind of partial to balance and to two sides. I think right maybe about 2 years ago is when we really started to see the emergence of digital only fashion. And I think it's super inspiring and like can be a big opportunity for brands to enter the metaverse. But on the other hand, we're still, I would say, quite far from this being like massively adopted and really understood. And so my goal is more to be kind of like a bridge between these two sides, to both help educate brands how to use digital to become more sustainable in their processes, to like tap into new markets such as the metaverse. Those who are active in like putting on like game skins and these like kind of really undiscovered different opportunities for product categories. So yeah, I'd say like while building something like Alterrage, which is a label that's like purely Web3, is quite future focused. I still think it's really important to educate and like be a bridge to help bring others to this ecosystem. But then within this like Web3 kind of mentality. So yeah, I'd say it definitely helps. And I think with Phygital, which we'll talk about, is an opportunity to not like forsake one over the other, because brands still have like very real deadlines, things to maintain. And so how can they still be authentic and then also participate in like Web3 and digital? So yeah, I'd say it's a balance of two, of building what's coming and then also bridging to level up basically tradition.
By the way, these spheres of design in physical world and design in Web3, are these spheres separate now, or they are intersected? Or I would say, I would ask you another, would you suggest designers from the luxury real physical world to look into Web3 space? Because we are in Web3 space, we are not bounded with the limitations of the physical world. We may create everything without physical laws, right? So what will the answer on that?
Yeah, that's why, yeah, I think because, the design market is quite saturated in traditional fashion and luxury, I would recommend, yeah, designers to learn 3D on different programs. You have Clo, you have Blender, because it really gives you a new skill that I think will be extremely important in this new space. But then at the same time, we still have physical bodies. We still have things to dress. We still have physical events. And that's why I think this hybrid approach is really interesting. And so what I also kind of came up with is like taking Phygital, which is essentially bridging or like combining physical digital a bit further with a word I made up called meta-reality. And it just means that we'll kind of create products, create identity in, as of now, 3 spaces. So the first is the physical. We call it IRL, in real life. And so the physical has different constraints and benefits versus something in the digital, like you mentioned, can be extremely creative, have less limitations, in like imaginatively wise. But then the physical, it's like we're quite constrained by environmental problems. So how can we use digital to make the physical more on demand, more sustainable? So that's the first space. The second would be like the ORL, which is like augmented. And so how can you use digital on top of physical? And so I think in this, we're still waiting for the tech, we're still waiting for the glasses we're going to be wearing. And you see another layer, in the sci-fi movies. And so, but I think that AR is really well understood because of social media. And so these are the earrings I always wear on calls, and they work so well. It's just like with a snap camera, you can instantly plug it into any video application. And so I see it as really accessible. So that's the second. And then the last third space would be we call it LTL, larger than life. And so it's yeah, like you mentioned, the metaverse, it can be kind of anything. You can be on fire. You can really defy the constraints we have in the physical space. So yeah, that's why I believe like phygital is quite vague, but then if we use this kind of formula, you can tailor your products and make different lines that can relate to different customers and then still be right, like kind of authentic to the brand or the designer.
Well, till this moment of that podcast, we have successfully sold to our audience the idea of coming from the real world to Web3 world for designers, of course. And we have to notify them and make such a caution. What are the main difference between the design approach to the real world design, the real things, and in Web3? For what things should they be prepared for in Web3 space if they will decide to switch their careers or to expand their careers to Web3 from the physical world?
Yeah, I would say even the mentality of Web3 is very different than traditional. So traditional, I can give an example. So we, you know, like make collections that are then like revealed and released at one moment at a show. And so normally like that's quite, you know, exclusive, reserved. You shouldn't share any information before that. So you kind of design in like a very restricted environment. And so then you present something to a consumer that then you assume they want. So this is like quite a traditional way. But Web3 proposes just like turns it on its head, basically, I see. As the community is like directly involved with making decisions, it's more transparent. There's less, I think, of a fear of copying, and it's more about if you're copied, it's seen more as a derivative that can then put benefit back to the original. And like that is basically like verified by like smart contracts and by blockchain. So I think that's like the fundamental technology that empowers like this kind of reversal, which is ideally more open, more equal, and more fair, based on kind of profit sharing versus maybe one-time payments in like the traditional sense. So that's why it's also hard to kind of combine those two quite radically different like lenses and viewpoints. But I still think there's ways for brands to kind of pick elements in Web3 that can start the journey. And so for designers, yeah, I just recommend learning 3D. It's, I would say, massively important skill. And then starting to connect with communities that are in Web3 to learn about like how to have a wallet. And also for me, when I learned, it helped a lot to be in these groups, to have like kind of encouragement of like working on projects together. And everything is also like, you know, in a computer, it's all decentralized. So it's quite accessible. And so if I'm in Paris, like many of my contacts are not in Paris, like they're in, you know, like Asia, they're in the US. So yeah, Web3 can really help to connect, I would say as well.
You know, one of the simplest definition of Web3 I've ever heard is the following. Before year 2000, we had Web1, space we were able just to read. Then Web2 came, where we have been able to read and write social media and so on and so forth. This is the world of the vast majority of the population of the Earth is living now. And then Web3 comes, and Web3, the crucial difference is we are able to own like in the physical world. Sounds crazy, and not everybody understands how we may own something in the electronic digital space, but this is how Web3 works. So I would ask you, what excites you most of all in the Web3 space?
Yeah, I think the barrier to entry is what is exciting, because fashion has been, you know, like quite an exclusive like industry, also depending on like your field or your level. So for me, it basically took like 10 years to fight to get to work in luxury. And so I don't think many other people have that opportunity or are able to do that. And so that's why I think, yeah, at least my experience in Web3 has been a lot more accessible. Also, the maybe depends on the community, but the tone is like quite supportive and quite open and accepting. So I think for fashion, that's really major, to have that kind of contrast and to basically combine technology, identity, together to form ideally something that's more sustainable in the physical world, which is kind of the reason I am a designer, is to make responsible digital and physical design. So I would say that for me is really exciting. But then also the ownership is interesting because, right, Web2 is all about, subscription. It's not at all about owning. So I think we still have to determine what do we want to own and why, and not, right, just throw everything on chain because it's a possibility, but like, how can we be strategic about, like, kind of how I mentioned this formula, like make your product based on constraints of the situation, of the environment. How do we know, right, this is what I want to own, this maybe is less important. I think, yeah, we still have a ways to go on understanding that and then making it understandable to more of the majority, I would say.
You fill a lot of roles in different projects up now, or tell us briefly what your current project, main kind of project and main roles you are filling now then.
Yeah. So I have more of a kind of creative director role in a couple projects. Also work as a designer to create 3D models, to create filters. And so for one of the projects that I founded, which is Alterrage, and so we've been around now for about a year and a half. And so we are a DAO-led fashion label, which is quite unique. When I've seen like what's kind of started in digital fashion about 2 years ago, it's been really an innovative approach, but we've also taken the innovative and I'd say more difficult route of trying to do a DAO. How do you introduce kind of governance and a tokenized system, and right, these ideas that are quite unusual on top of using like digital to create product. So it's like double innovation at the same time. So yeah, started that. And so we have a team of about 10 of us on the core team, and an active kind of community around 15. So we're still quite small, but we've really learned a lot about how we can structure to work together as a label in like a Web3 ecosystem. So I'm the founder of this, help to facilitate projects, collaborations, creative direction for collections, and slowly we'll start to kind of open up more and more the ecosystem in like a responsible way. And then also, working on Metaverse Fashion Council with helping to connect brands with the ecosystem, starting to launch NFT projects, and lastly, consultant designer for also kind of more traditional side of brands, helping them to leverage these tools.
Amazing. Yeah, so busy person. Well, I have noticed that the DAO form of DAO structure, form of human cooperation, has been widely used in the fashion in Web3 segment. Metaverse Fashion Council DAO, Alterrage DAO, and so on and so forth. Is this because DAO has become fashion feature in fashion industry, or is this because DAO is the well-suited form of human cooperation, especially well-suited for collaboration in the Metaverse fashion segment?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, at least my perspective of like doing this and deciding this direction for Alterrage, the fundamental goal that we're trying to achieve is that what you contribute is your influence. Because I think what we disagree with of how things have worked in Web 2 is just this idea of things not being fair. Like, let's fundamentally get to the problem. And so how do we then use like Web 3 to increase fairness between contributors, those maybe who have more like kind of leadership roles. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different kinds of DAOs. There's service DAOs, collector DAOs, product DAOs. We're more, I'd say, of like a product DAO because we're more project based, and we have a goal to like create an outcome on a timeline. So that does require some kind of facilitation, leadership, but we do it in a more democratic way. So I wouldn't say, right, we function like a protocol because that's quite different and more, right, heavily reliant on smart contracts. We kind of integrate these different tools into a system that then can create collections. So I'd say we're a bit more of a hybrid approach, and like how, Wyoming defines a DAO of being like, you are fundamentally running on smart contracts. I would like to see many like examples of that, because you have, you know, the tech, but you have humans. And I think this is for the past year what we've learned how to kind of cover both, and not forget, because design is very, you know, also like sensitive, and is art. And so that's not, you know, just something that like, even now we have all these AI tools, so who knows what will happen. But yeah, it's not something I think that can be just forgotten. So finding that balance between the two, whether it's aligns like with the fundamental definition of a DAO, I would say it's more about how then do you reward and contributors, and make that like a fair, equitable ecosystem.
Absolutely. And now, you know, I really love your format. This is precise formula you have invented. DAO-led fashion label. First label, then DAO-led. It points in essence and then in structure how this essence is coming into being. And DAO is the simplest and easiest form for every person in the world to start contributing to something useful in the world. So now it's call to action time. Whom do you need in Alterrage DAO? Make all of the statements, all the call to action, who may join Alterrage right now, and what first steps? Step 1, step 2, step 3, should they do right now? Where to come? All the links will be put in description, of course, to join and start contributing to Alterrage.
Perfect. Yeah. So when I started, I think I always began with like vision and values, which is quite unusual when you start a company. So I met just like various people who had very different backgrounds to myself, people in tech, people, right, in production, and most of the team doesn't have a fashion background. But when I began this way, we had a much like deeper connection. And so I think fundamentally that's why my team is still like with me, and why we've still continued and survived, and gone through like this very difficult process to try to build something so new. So I'd say, right, first questions like to ask yourself, like when wanting to join kind of any DAO ecosystem, is like, what do you want to kind of share and teach? And then what do you want to learn? Because I think the future of work is really based on this exchange. It's no longer about like, okay, I come, I do my job, I leave. It has the opportunity to become more of like a dialogue. So then I always ask this, like, it's less about like, okay, this is what you can do for us. It's more about what are you interested in, because then we can plug you in that area and then try to make this more right, mutual. So yeah, to be honest, like we have learned so much this year. So we're still kind of restructuring to set up like based on those learnings. But we basically have like 3 kind of sections for people to get involved with within the community and then join the DAO. The first is like the studio. So that's more where we make like the products. Then we have the community, which is more about creating campaigns for those collections. And then lastly is the lab, which is more heavily around like kind of Web3 tech, blockchain, smart contracts. So we have those 3 elements. And what we've really found, like fundamentally why we're doing this, is to connect fashion to activism, which is, you know, just all these new ideas. But that's like why we're here. And so now we're creating a more concise format that allows to onboard people more easily. So I would say we're not quite there yet. There's still like, you know, some adjustments and things to be made, but everyone is welcome. I would suggest joining the Discord. We're also going to be starting spaces on Twitter up again, and starting to, yeah, be able to share what's coming, how to get involved. And then we'll be launching kind of open projects where people can start to contribute and learn. So, yeah.
Well, I have to ask you about NFT as a building block. I personally call them building blocks of the metaverse, because Web3, as we have already said, is about owning, and this owning is made through having private keys on your NFTs. And every item in Web3 space is represented by an NFT. What are your general thoughts on NFT as a tool, as an instrument for creating the world? So how do you see its potential to change the world?
Yeah, I think this is like, I mean, as fundamental as blockchain, because it just changes the game about the resale value also of like taking a digital good and making it have the same kind of level of value as something in the physical space. Like, for example, like these earrings are also NFTs, So, and I value them actually more than like physical earrings. And so, but I can now like resell them. I can see the line of transactions. Everything is very transparent. So I think, yeah, NFTs can really be integrated into any industry. But for fashion, it's pretty major that you can now own digital product as physical, because 3D isn't new to fashion. We've been using it in industry and production to be more efficient. But what is new is the idea of digital ownership. And so that for fashion is like quite crazy and going to, I think, totally change the landscape. And yeah, and then being able to essentially have your life in the metaverse, whether that's owning, you know, like your dream villa or your whatever it is, but will be have that value of resale. I think that is pretty crazy. And also what kind of functionalities NFTs can have. They can, right, change over time. There's going to be more and more opportunities of how we can use smart contracts to add in utility to these within the properties, right, the metadata, and how to kind of better connect that to make sure it's, stays connected, basically. So yeah, I'd say massive opportunity is not going away. I know people in fashion keep asking, but yeah, it's really cool.
Well, so thank you for mentioning the word utility. You do remember when NFT came into the picture in the end of 2020, the vast majority of people were disappointed with the lack of utility. What is the utility of your NFT, they asked? Just a digital picture, but I can copy paste or save on my computer by clicking the right click on the mouse. And here, a lot of things are being discussed last time about the concept of smart NFT. This is the second generation, NFT 2.0, I would say. This is NFT with collateral inside. And this in particular, Envelop has been working on for 2 years already. So imagine just an NFT, put some fungible token inside, like money in the token. And here we have an NFT, the same NFT technically, we call it wrapped NFT, with some fungible token. Its price is at least not less than the price of fungible token inside. Then we wrap it with some features like the time lock, event lock. So we receive an amazing tool with a lot of use cases. So what are your main thoughts? Have you ever heard about this smart NFT, or they also called dynamic NFT, or NFT with collateral, or smart NFT, of course? So what are your main thoughts on that? Is that a good idea?
Yeah, dynamic, we're actually working on a pretty great project right now, so hopefully I can share more about that soon for the dynamic NFTs. Yeah, I think big opportunity there. And then the wrapping is also really interesting because what we do at Alterrage is to create kind of like this set of products that then have like, an idea of interoperable identity. So we have a physical, we have a filter, and then we have like kind of this digital collectible game skin. So being able to wrap these together is like very interesting because then you can, right, bridge across these 3 worlds and 3 spaces. So I think that is like a really good utility for wrapping in our instance. And then, like you mentioned, also like you could even involve it, right, like the full NFT is not only, right, putting some kind of like currency into it, it also has access to events. Like you could just create this whole chain pathway. But I think I would say before getting too complex, like also to think about what's like the user, what do they need? Like are they interested also in that? Because I think another thing is just to create a bunch of NFTs and then have them sit there isn't very sustainable either, I would say. It's kind of just repeating the same problem we already have in the physical space. So I also, if you want to create it or tell me how to do it, to like just be able to do kind of like a pre-sale, which I guess is like whitelisting for NFTs, just to avoid minting whatever like isn't wanted. I guess we have mechanisms like burning and whitelisting, but I don't think it's perfect yet. Like it's really, yeah, the goal is like, sell out your project, you have to pump it up, get all this hype. How can we take a different approach of being like really consciously buying it because we care about it, because that's my vision in physical space for fashion, and so also would like to echo that in the digital.
Well, if somebody understands what is a wallet, or let's say a luxury designed Prada wallet, a leather wallet with a $100 bill inside, or envelope with one present for present, right? Envelope with $100 bill. So you will understand the concept of rep NFT. And I love the term, I love the term programmable money, because Web3 is the space where we can program everything we want with the value. We have never had such an opportunity in all the human history. And we've had this just because the blockchain technology. That's what excites me most of all in this. So the whole economics is growing in our eyes. Everybody may join us right now by, let's say, joining Alterrage DAO and started contributing. So this is craziness. So Lauren, we've almost covered all I wanted. Finally, Web3 may seem quite a sophisticated area for non-tech persons, wallets, cryptography, and so on and so forth. Now, but money, of course, and earning money. How to learn Web3 for newcomers? How would you suggest to learn Web3? What to listen, what to read?
Yeah, I think there's different levels, right? It's like, how deep do you want to go? So for me to learn, the easiest was to join a community because it was quite a diverse and already very, supportive ecosystem that was a lot based on education. So you could just Google like different DAOs that either are in digital fashion, or any kind of DAO like that is teaching about kind of DeFi, crypto wallets. There's a lot of opportunities around there. So that I would say, is like the more radical level, like you are ready to, invest some time, you're ready to contribute. And be more focused on learning versus kind of like receiving maybe financial compensation is important. Learning is definitely required in this. And so that's more the full in-depth if you're ready to, really commit. But like initial tests, I would suggest just going to like Twitter Spaces and just listening and starting there, because I also had a podcast where I just tried to learn about different types of profiles. How does it all work? How does this ecosystem function? But there's nothing stopping you just from listening in a podcast or a Twitter space if this space feels overwhelming, because we use like weird words like bear market. Like, why are we saying that? So there's a lot of terminology that especially like traditional fashion doesn't understand, and it makes them fearful. So I think, if it feels scary, just join a space, listen. You can always like try to speak to people individually if joining a DAO feels overwhelming, because also with my experience in Web3 is that people are quite open to conversations, maybe versus kind of the more traditional experience. So I think I'd start with that. Like, simply Google how to set up a MetaMask. That's probably just a good place to start. Join a space. If you're ready to kind of take the next step, join a DAO, and you'll get there. And it's not like a fixed journey. It's always something different. It's always growing. Like, my knowledge has gained and like maybe been lost, like technical versus like, theoretical. It's always fluctuating. So I don't think people should expect like they're going to arrive at a journey. But what is interesting is that we're all kind of building this together, and it is still so new. So for me, that's exciting, because I've always wanted to, be at the start of something and help to shape it and form it. So I'd say there's different levels. Don't be afraid of the big weird words just to get started.
Yeah, Web3 may become the most interesting journey in life ever. And Lauren, you mentioned community, and Paris in particular is widely known as one of the biggest community city of the community. For example, the Ethereum, one of the largest Ethereum communities based in France, the famous event ETHCC and so on and so forth. You are in Paris. Is it possible, or do you join somewhere events in Paris and France as a speaker? Is it possible to meet you in Paris personally and drink a cup of coffee and to hear yourself personally? Is it possible, and how to do this?
Yeah, that would be great. And so we've also started to host events in Paris, more around Web3 fashion, digital fashion. So that is like quite open, and so that will grow more and more as we start to kind of introduce it to the fashion industry here. So that's really exciting that we started that. So also definitely an opportunity. I'm also happy to, meet people physically now, because of like, we're always digital. So I'm happy to grab a coffee and also virtually is fine as well. So the industry is growing here, and there's quite a few NFT meetups, I would say, in Paris. But as far as like Web3 fashion, I'd say is still pretty new. So that's what we are basically starting. So.
Well, so what's the best way to follow you on the internet? LinkedIn, Twitter, how to get in touch with you?
Oh, there's so many platforms these days, isn't there? I would say for Alterrage, Discord is the best, or Twitter. And then me personally, LinkedIn. I'm still a bit slow, trying to get back to these messages, but I will at some point get back to it. So yeah, I recommend those 2 ways.
Well, so our Paris fans, it's very easy to catch up with Lauren and Paris if you are in Paris, but also follow her online. She's a very open-minded person. And this has been DAO Envelop podcast episode. We got the Metaverse, Web3, fashion, and our Web3 future, which is so bright. We create this by our minds and hands. And that's why we are talking about that podcast with such people who create the Web3 space with their own vision and future. A lot of amazing people and visionaries have always been in this space, and you may have become such a person. So thank you very much for watching and listening. Lauren Kacher, Web3 fashion pioneer and the founder of Alterrage Fashion DAO, and me, Eugene Crypto MC, where you. Thank you for watching and listening. Please like, share, subscribe, join our Telegram, try to be subscribed on our YouTube, and stay tuned for next episodes of the DAO Envelop podcast. Bye-bye. Blockchain, BLOCK chain. Digital money, smart contracts, NFT, IDO, decentralization, transparency, so many opportunities, but so many challenges. Some financial manipulators, by their actions, confuse blockchain solutions and block their development. The idea that the blockchain should bring copyright and royalties protection to the next level is quite old, but the realizations of these ideas are not perfect at all. There is another problem of determining the value of a particular cryptocurrency or NFT. These and other problems need to be solved. Fortunately, the blockchain infrastructure is evolving. My name is E, Mr. E, and I represent the Envelop project. Many things have already been invented in the blockchain today. Tokens, smart contracts, platforms for creating your own coins, NFTs, exchanges for buying, selling, and exchanging all these blockchain resources. Envelop is another step in the development of crypto technologies. The protocol that works with NFT and cryptocurrencies. The idea is simple but disruptive. Let's assume you have an NFT, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Using the Envelop protocol, you can wrap the original NFT accompanied with several tokens. Technically, you get a similar NFT, but what is the breakthrough here? Once wrapped, the token has a number of additional features that were not available before. The minimal cost appears. It is provided with coins wrapped together with NFT. An asset wrapped with Envelop has a number of properties that allow the original author to receive royalties from the resale of that asset. Various rules can be applied to the wrapped token. For example, a lock period for unwrapping. It secures the asset till the determined moment or safeguards it from speculation during the hype period. At the same time, wrapped tokens can be transferred and traded. These are just some of the scenarios for using Envelop. NFTs become more popular, and the tools provided by Envelop expand the opportunities of NFTs utilization. Wide application possibilities are achieved due to the fact that, in addition to the protocol, the project includes a number of subsystems. The protocol provides functions wrapping and unwrapping. Oracle Mechanics provides asset valuation using analytical algorithms. Index provides a summary assessment of several NFT assets with the common criteria. The project has its own token, which connects all elements of the system. Altogether, this is Envelop, a tool in the blockchain world for building modern and secure systems in various fields. Find more info about the project on the website. Envelop. Make your NFT valuable. Just practical, no hype.